Andrea, thank you so much for joining us here at SuperReturn International. Fantastic presentation that talked a lot about what the approach needs to be for private equity in an environment like this. So what do you see going forward that that approach needs to be? You described it as having either a glass half full or a glass half empty approach, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's a glass and there's stuff in the glass. And I think the solution within private investments, because look, you can't time your exposure into the market, right? And so even knowing that valuations are at all-time highs, even knowing that the supply of capital is probably the greatest it's ever been, there are ways that you can pick a path through private investing to find the managers, the strategies, and the geographies where the opportunities are still capable of delivering the elusive, great return that we are all seeking here at the conference. And so just being more careful about your selection can be very important.
I think you described it as having laser focus, didn't you? It's a time when this industry has really got to step up and not presume the return, but really work hard for it.
Yes. I mean, we're at a time where, look, when the industry was more in its nascency, the median return, so the average return was in the 20% net to LPs. The average manager did that. That's fantastic. The average manager today is delivering an 11% return net. Where did all the return go? And so to your very point, both investors as LPs and the GPs, we all need to level up what we expect and how we're going to get it if we're going to earn the kinds of returns that we want to see in alternative assets.
Before we talk about specific opportunities, where do you see the greatest risks at the moment, and how do you sort of hedge for those and make sure that you've got a good, robust system in place to make sure you're protecting against the downside?
I mean, you've got several risks. So as a limited partner who is committing into the asset class, you have to be prepared to make good on the commitments that you've made no matter what may come, right? And so if you think back to the global financial crisis, a lot of investors had a denominator problem, and that when the public market shrunk, so did their overall corpus, which meant they were over allocated to private equity and also couldn't really redeem to make good on capital commitments. And so from an LP perspective, one of the things that we're talking quite a bit about is liquidity. How are you going to pay for what you've committed to? On the GP side, what we are very focused on is maintaining discipline. It's okay if you're doing deals in this environment, but are you doing deals that meet the same standards and rigor of the deals that you were doing 5 years ago? How are you tightening up your process so that you don't have a foot fault and buy something you shouldn't have at the wrong time with the wrong people? That's not going to end well.
So that's the care to be taken, but where are the opportunities in an environment like this? Because they're out there, aren't they?
Yeah. Opportunity can be a relative thing. Where we tend to look is, there was a slide that I presented which showed a bell curve with a lot of different opportunities all around the edges. What I would say is, sort of internally, what we describe it as look to the tails. So where we're focused is below the waves of all the noise and all the capital. Let's go find a lower middle market strategy with a very specific differentiated edge over there. Okay, now let's go over here and find a distress strategy where the team is completely aligned with our investors and we believe they also have a differentiated strategy. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet here to find the answer. You just have to do the spade work and really fan out into the market and make those decisions as you encounter them. So it's tough.
You talked about the different areas there, and I think you specifically talked about operator executive-led private equity being an interesting area at the moment. Tell me about that.
It's the equivalent of the student has become the teacher, right? It's a very interesting development. And so obviously for years, private investment professionals who often, no offense to anyone, came out of either investment banking, financial services, or consulting, and then were able to use their financial engineering and strategic consulting elements to acquire companies. And then they would find operators, executives from companies to come in and sort of do a lot of the heavy lifting because they knew how to operate a company. And so over the last couple of years, we've been very observant of this trend, which is now you have seasoned operating executives who have been working in a private equity context. Maybe it's an executive who's worked with a private equity fund on 3 different deals, suddenly wakes up and says, I can do this. And so now they're taking on the leadership of the fund that they're forming, and they're hiring junior private equity professionals, transaction professionals, to complete the investments. Very, very interesting thread, very interesting development.
It's interesting because as an industry, perhaps you could say private equity has been becoming more institutionalized, and therefore actually it's ripe for that sort of disruption where there are different people coming in, and so you've got to remain nimble as well.
Honestly, it's all in the search for return. Because as we talk about plain vanilla private equity, which is probably generating that 11% net return that I talked about, if you really want to achieve better than that, you need an edge. And an operator who really knows what to do with a company that they've acquired may bring more of that edge than an old school plain vanilla private equity shop.
There are an awful lot of people here at this conference, 2,700 delegates. If they were listening to you today, what do you hope they take away as the nugget from what you had to say?
What would they take away as the nugget?
Or what do you hope they'd take away? I think more than anything.
I'll tell you. I mean, it's interesting. I really appreciated having the opportunity to come and present at SuperReturn. I really did. And part of what's so exciting about being able to do it is the reason why I've been in the private investment space for my entire career, which is in search of that return. And it's not easy to generate. And the dispersion of that return, which I showed very early in the presentation, is for real. There's no index hugging in private equity. So if you can do the truffle hunting and find the needle in the haystack and mix all your metaphors together, you can still earn that kind of return. And that's really why I really wanted to end on glass half full, because I truly believe that those investment opportunities are out there. And to your point, there are all these strains and developments of this constantly evolving market. And I wanted those in the room to really widen out their aperture and think, okay, it's not just about buyouts. There's this whole world out there, and there's return to be had if I'm willing to do the hard work.
And to have the interesting, complex teams that can do that too.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Andrea. Great to talk to you.
It's great. Thanks.